Hello guys, welcome back to another video, and today is part 4 of my card review for the Naval Warfare expansion. Naval Warfare is the next expansion coming out in cards. It's like slightly under 90 cards, I think. It's coming out on June 18th, which is in about 16 hours from the point of when we're recording, or it will release in 16 hours. It is, I think, the service will go live with the expansion at 9 a.m. EST on June 18th, so convert that into whatever time that is for you. And the servers will be down for a brief moment before then, but if you're seeing this video, hopefully it is right when I'm releasing it, which is going to be about 12 or so hours before the expansion becomes available. But this is part 4, so if you haven't seen my previous parts, you can go back and look at them. And I will be releasing part 5 probably sometime on June 18th when the expansion is released, either slightly before in the morning or slightly later in the day, depending on if I get around and recording it later today. But the cards that we're going to be looking at today is sort of the cards that were released in a chunk in the last couple of days. Leading up to the expansion, they sort of dumped all of the cards right at the end, so the other cards of the expansion have already been revealed at this point, but you subscribe and stick around for part 5 to see that. But anyways, that is enough rambling from me. Let's roll the intro and jump into the cards.
What a performance there by J-King.
J-King, full plot armor.
J-King is pushing himself into the ranks of the legend.
J-King is our world champion! J-King 7! What? The back-to-back Cards world champion!
Alrighty, so we have asked, we have pleaded, and we are seeing the Polish special. It is 15th Wolves Regiment, and it is actually quite good. So, the 15th Wolves Regiment is a 5-credit 4/4 infantry, special rarity, 1 operation cost. So, its body is quite bad. This is absolutely atrocious. This is like a 3-credit body, so it better have at least a 2-credit effect to make this card, you know, not abysmal. And its effect is deployment, convert target unit into routed troops, draw 2 cards if it was friendly. So that is an incredible deployment effect that is more than worth it for a 5-cost 4/4 infantry. So let's talk about this effect. For 5 credits, you can turn any unit in the game, on the opponent's side of the board, into routed troops, which is the 1/1 infantry with 1 operation cost. It is a token unit. And there is not, like, a way for your opponent to convert it back or undo it. They can't suppress it and get their guy back. It is essentially, for all points and purposes, it is suppressed and then destroyed. So it gets rid of destruction effects, it gets rid of any passive triggers that it's doing, and it just gets turned into a routed troop. And that is an incredibly powerful effect, because destroying a unit as just an order is cost at 6 credits. This is 5 credits, and also you get a body. And also, it's not an order, which means it can't be countered by something like Ultra, it can't be made to cost more by something like Blackwatch, and it gets around things that say can't be targeted by orders. So this is incredible. Now, obviously there is a feasible world where it is slightly worse than Blade of the Samurai or other destroy target unit cards, because you might have 1 health, and you might be playing this on a unit in the front line, and it gets turned into a 1/1, and then it still kills you. That is incredibly unlikely. There's going to be much more oftentimes, though, that you turn something that has a big destruction effect into a 1/1 and get rid of the destruction effect, or you just don't care that there's a 1/1 left. Maybe you combo it with Crossfire, maybe it is just simply a unit on the board your opponent has to spend credits operating to move it to make room for other units. All in all, the routed troop does not matter at all, and just in case a 5-credit 4/4 that lets you convert an enemy unit into a routed troop was not good enough, it also has the added flexibility of, if you target your own card with this and convert any one of your units into a routed troop, you draw 2 cards. And that is incredibly powerful, because, you know, you can do that on, like, say, your own routed troop. There are other cards that convert things into routed troops. Your opponent might give you a routed troop. They might convert your big unit into a routed troop, and then you just play 15 Wolves and convert that routed troop into a second routed troop, and then you draw 2 cards. So it's just a 5-credit 4/4, draw 2 cards. It's kind of like a Sherman. Now, using this for draw is going to be worse than using this as removal, more often than not, just because again, the comparison to Sherman is quite apt, and it is worse than Sherman in that it costs 4. Sherman costs 4, where this costs 5, and Sherman is a tank, where this is not a tank. Now, obviously, this Sherman has the caveat of needing to control the front line, whereas this, you can draw the 2 cards without needing to control the front line. As long as you have another unit, you can turn into routed troops. But the fact that it just has the flexibility to draw if you need it, if you're in a situation where you're just really low on card draw, you're playing against a deck like Handlock, or maybe there's a specific card in your deck you need to find to win the game immediately, and you can just use 15 Wolf Regiments to dig. So, all in all, this is an incredible card. I don't think it is going to see any play at least in the next 6 months, for one very simple reason, and that reason is that this is a Polish card that is not a Legions and does not say Intel on it. So, what do I mean by that? So, Poland has a few different archetypes, and Poland is a minor nation, meaning you can only play it as an ally nation, you can only have 12 cards from it, and it has to compete with all of the other nations in the game for your package of 12 cards coming from Poland to be better than the 12 cards you could run from any other nation in the game. And maybe you can do that with a Intel package, which is the, Tarnows and the Legions, and you can run additional Intel cards from the main nation, like a Japan or Britain, are the 2 main ones you do with Legions. And, there's some value to Legions. It's something unique that Poland offers. It has synergies with some of the other nations. And it is the really only Polish archetype that has ever seen any amount of real play outside of Exile Aggro, which was just based around a very broken hammer home that has since been nerfed. So this does not fit into Legions. Now, it is a very good card on its own, and if you could run 20 Polish cards, you might consider running this in a Legions deck just because it's very powerful, even though it doesn't have synergy with Legions. But you can only run 12 Polish cards, and Legions is a deck that is built around how many, it needs to have a huge amount of synergy to work effectively, and using one of your 12 Polish slots on a card that is not synergistic whatsoever with the deck is just not particularly good. It is just, unfortunately, a waste of space where you could be running other stuff. And if Poland is going to see any serious play post this expansion, I think it is going to be in a Legions deck, most likely Japan-Poland Legions. So unfortunately, despite this card being an incredibly good card, I don't think it's going to see any play immediately. That being said, there's always the possibility that the next expansion brings in more Polish cards that could support a non-Legions Polish control deck, in which case this card has a ton of possibility of being very, very good. You could also have a Polish mid-range deck. There's some support from that. Some of the Polish cards were not absolutely terrible from United Front, like the Danuta is quite good. Just thinking off the top of my head, Iron Division is not bad at all. So, yeah, there's a few good, decent Polish units, and just the more good Polish cards that we get, it might not lead to something immediately, but it allows for the possibility of leading to something down the line. And that is, we think of Italy as arguably perhaps the best allied nation out of all of the allied nations, both currently and historically. However, that was not always the case. There was a long time where Italy only had Alpine, and if it wasn't Alpine, it was unplayable, and Alpine only worked with Germany and also wasn't particularly good. And then they kept getting a couple good control cards one at a time, and it was like, okay, well, no one's going to play this because there's not enough reasons to pick Italy as a control ally nation, but it's good. And then they eventually hit the tipping point where suddenly there was 12 good Italian control cards, and then Italy became a control nation. So we're reaching towards that point with Poland. They definitely need a few more tools to get over that line. But hey, this is so much better than Carpathians. This is so much better than Orb General Haller. 50th Wolves, certified cracked, probably isn't going to see any immediate play. Then let's talk about La Division Leclerc. This is a 4-credit 3/3 infantry for France. It is a limited rarity, 2 operation cost, so this is a very slow, chunky guy, and he's absolutely atrocious for his body, but his text reads gets +3/+3 the first time you shuffle your deck each turn, and we have seen there's a lot of ways to shuffle your deck at 1 credit, and there's a few ways to shuffle your decks at 0 credits, which means if you play this down on turn 4 and shuffle your deck at the same time, this plays down as a 4-credit 6/6 card. That is quite good. That is a card you would definitely run in a lot of decks. 4 credit, 6/6 card. Now, obviously, it's a lot weaker than that if it gets suppressed, but that's kind of true for every guard, because you're playing a guard for it being a guard. However, if it doesn't get suppressed, 4 credits for a 6/6 card. That's quite good. Pretty difficult to remove right away. On the following turn, you can shuffle again, and then attack with this. And now it's a 9/9. You basically got, like, the 4th guards from Soviets, the 9/9 Elite Guard. Yeah, except now it's also going to continue to grow, because then you push it to the front line, and it's a 9/9. And then your opponent can't answer it, because it's a 9/9. And then on the next turn, you shuffle again, and it's a 12/12. And then you hit the opponent in the face for 12. And then on the following turn, you shuffle again, and you hit them in the face for 15, and you've won the game. And it's, what, turn 7? Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that can happen between when you play this and turn 7 when you hit them in the face for 15, such as they remove this, they have units in the front line so you can't get this into the front line very easily, you just run out of shuffle cards in your hand, or it gets suppressed. You know, so it's a very powerful card. This is a very potent card, and this is a card that the shuffle deck needed because they had the 3 credit 2/2 that gives all your units and itself +1/+1 when you shuffle. That was good, but it didn't really have, like, an oomph to it. Like, it was like, well, it's really good if you have units on the board, but if you lose the board, you're just gonna lose. There's no big finisher, there's no comeback potential. Leclerc is kind of both, because if you've lost the board to another aggro deck, Leclerc is just going to buy you a ton of time to draw cards, or to find the right pieces, or just simply make value trades to come back and pop off. Or, if you're playing against a control deck and they keep taking out your guys and prevent you from making a wide board, well, maybe they can't answer a huge Leclerc. This guy, absolutely cracked. Definitely going to see play in the shuffle deck, if the shuffle deck sees play. And that's obviously the caveat where anytime you see a lot of cards being supported for an archetype, it's like, well, this isn't going to see play in anything other than Japan, France, shuffle, at least in a world that we can imagine. Obviously, they could always just print a bunch of Britain shuffle in the next expansion, but currently, the only deck this is going to see play in is Japan, France, shuffle. And that deck probably going to be pretty good. How good is it going to be? That's something that we're just going to have to wait and see. Then we get to Soviets, and we've already seen that Soviets have a bit of a convert mechanic, not to be confused with the covert mechanic, which is also a Soviet archetype. I am very glad that I'm not dyslexic, because, oh boy, this would get very confusing very fast. Anyways, the convert mechanic is a card for the convert mechanic. It is Surveil, a 1 credit standard order for Soviets. Choose a card in hand, convert it into target unit. And that can be a unit that you control, or it can be a unit that the opponent controls. So how this would work is you would drag this card out of your hand and point it at something on the board, and then it would bring up choose a card in your hand to convert into that unit, and then you would pick the card in your hand, and then you'd get an extra copy of that. So it would allow you to, if your opponent plays down a big thing, you can get a copy of that big thing in your hand. If you play down a big thing, you can get a second copy of it into your hand. And also it triggers any of the do stuff when you convert things, and that's all pretty dandy, and it's all for 1 credit. The downside is you are just completely losing card advantage by playing this card, because you spend this card to turn a different card in your hand into something else. So the net effect is you are down a card in your hand, and you are up a card in your hand being something else. So in effect, you are down 2 cards in exchange for whatever the card that you picked, and that is being picked from a limited pool of cards on the board, and also it's added to your hand, it's not on the board, so there's no tempo with this. So this is difficult to imagine being good. Now, maybe there's like some crazy combo thing that I'm missing here, where you get like multiple copies of a very specific elite with this card, and there's also, if you can stick a Bergman, which is the 2 credit 2/3 German guy that says when you convert a card, draw a card, or the first time you convert a card on your turn, draw a card. In that case, then you're not going card negative, you lose 2 cards and gain 2 cards, so at least it's fine then, but like, do you really want to run Bergman and Surveil for that effect? Probably not. So yeah, this card doesn't feel that great for me, but like the people, all the Timmies of the world are going to use this to get additional copies of like their Joseph Stalins or whatever. This is the poor man's printer Soviets. Then we have a strike group, which is honestly one of the most insane cards of the expansion, and I'm not seeing enough people talk about this. This card is absolutely insane. So what does Strike Group do? So Strike Group is a 3-credit limited order for US, and we'll start by reading the bottom text, which is the effect that happens when you play the card, and that is your air units get +1/+1. So 3 credits to give all of your air units +1/+1. That is absolutely abysmal. That is like not even the poor man's close air support. That is like the poor man's close air support. That is absolutely abysmal. However, the important part of this card, and the reason you play it, is not the bottom text. It's not the effect of you playing the card. You playing the card does not matter a whole lot. And obviously, it has some synergies. US has a lot of ways to summon a lot of air units in this expansion, with Brewsters being summoned from Yorktown, which can summon 4, and it's a special, so you could have 2 copies of that, so that's 8, and then Air Cover summons 2, but you can have 4 copies of that, so that's an additional 8. So in total, you can run 16 air units out of 6 cards, so, you know, Strike Group has a deck to fit into, and that's on not counting any of the other air units you run from US or whatever your ally nation is, assuming you do US main. So there's definitely a world for this, but remember, we're bringing back the air cover? Not air cover. I'm blanking on the name, but we're bringing back a US card that's 1 credit, choose 1, move all of your fighters into the front line, or give all of your fighters +1/+1. And all of the Brewsters are fighters, so you're probably going to be, like 90% of your air units are going to be fighters, so then it's basically just 1 credit Strike Group for the on-play effect. But Strike Group has a show when drawn effect, which is a new mechanic from this expansion. We've seen it already with a couple of cards. But show when drawn means when you draw the card at any point in the game, not during the mulligan, which is important. If you keep this card in your mulligan, or you mulligan it away and then you draw it after the mulligan, it will not trigger. But say on turn 2, your turn starts on turn 2, and you draw a card at the start of your turn, it will say show when drawn. It shows it to the opponent. They gain intel on the card, so they will be able to see Strike Group in your hand. And then it says, draw a random air unit from your deck. So, in effect, you draw 2 cards. Which is incredible, because one is an air unit, and the other one is Strike Group, which has synergy with air units. So the Strike Group essentially is free if you don't get it in your mulligan, because you don't have to spend any resources drawing this card. It's basically just almost a card you permanently have in your hand, so to speak, just because it replaces itself when you draw it. Now, there's some caveats there. You kind of get it in your mulligan, of course, and then that sucks a lot. You could also draw this and overdraw because your hand size is too full. But generally speaking, this card is essentially just free to put into your deck because it just replaces itself, and then also has the added effect of thinning your deck, meaning your deck is effectively smaller than the required 40 cards to go in, or 39 cards technically, because of Strike Group, which means you're going to be able to more consistently see the other cards in your deck, which is typically a good thing. So, on top of all of that, this card is incredible. But then it has additional synergy with some of the cards that let you put cards back on top of your deck to trigger again the show when drawn effect. And most notably, Night Patrol, which is, like, honestly one of I keep bringing up Night Patrol in so many of these cards, but it's so important. It is such a key enabler. But it is the standard US order, 2 credits, draw 2 cards, then pick a card in your hand to put on top of your deck. If you play Night Patrol and you draw Strike Group, you draw the 2 cards. Strike Group does show when drawn, and then you draw a 3rd card, and then you have to pick a card to go back out of those cards you just drew and the rest of your hand. You pick Strike Group to go back, it goes on top of your deck, and then on the following turn you redraw Strike Group and then draw an additional air unit. So in effect, you just didn't have to pay the cost on Night Patrol. Night Patrol essentially just became a 2 credit draw 2. Which is already incredibly good, but on top of that, you're specifically tutoring out the air units, which is probably what you want to be doing if you're running Strike Group in your deck. So what I'm trying to say here is this card's absolutely insane. And the biggest thing in a US main version of this, while you're thinking, okay, but like air cover in Yorktown, they're orders, they're not actually air units. And obviously this has synergy with air cover in Yorktown because of the on-play effect, but you don't draw those. What are the US air units you put it in your deck? Now obviously you could run this with US as the ally with like something like Britain, and we'll talk about that in a second, or you can run something like a German ally, and then you're running FWs and the Arados and the new one-cost FW in your deck to be drawing out those. But let's not forget the Coronado, the new US bomber, the 3-credit 2/4 bomber that says, when drawn, summon a Brewster, which is an incredible effect. You get a free 1/2 in your support line, and it's a 1/2 that has synergy with the rest of your deck. Now, if you're running only, say, like 6 or 7 air units in your deck, and 3 of them are Coronado, that means when you draw Strike Group, you have a 50%, not only do you just draw another card for free, it's a 50% chance, thereabouts, that the card that you draw is then also going to summon you a free token. So it is a card that says, when you draw this, draw a second card and also get a unit on the board at 0 cost, and it's a unit that has synergy with both of the cards that you just drew. This card is insane. And then you play Night Patrol, and you put that back on top of your deck. And if you need more air units, you put the Strike Group back on top of your deck, and it will give you more draws. Or if, in this case, if you've drawn all the air units, or your hand's getting big, you put the Coronado back on top of your deck, and then you draw that, and you just get another free Brewster on the board. This deck is going to be absolutely cracked. And I don't necessarily mean that, and it's going to be like the most overpowered thing you could do, because, you know, you're doing all that, you're drawing a lot of air units, you're summoning free Brewsters, and you still might die on turn 4 to Jaguar. That still might happen. So it's not necessarily going to be cracked, but it's going to be very, very powerful. It's going to be very, very fun, I think. And honestly, most importantly, it's just something for US to do that is different. Because US has just been doing the same things for so long. And I know Throp was, like, kind of different. But, like, once you played Throp for, like, 10 games, you're like, wait a second, this kind of feels a lot like Ramp. But I've just played, like, 3 operation cost units instead of British Guards. But the effect is still kind of the same. I'm gaining a bunch of credits, I'm healing a bunch, and then I drop some big guys and kill my opponent. This is just something completely brand new for US to do. But I said we were going to mention it. You can also run this in a British main shell, where you still run the Strike Groups and you run the Night Patrols as a way to just, like, consistently draw through your deck and, like, fish out the stuff like the Swordfish and the Gladiators and the Kitty Hawks and the Spitfire or the Wellington, and just, like, you know, the standard stuff that you're running in the British air deck. But on top of that, you don't need the Coronados, you don't need the air covers and the entire Brewster package. You just run the regular British air package, and then from US cards, you put in Strike Group, Night Patrol, and Alabama. And now you're just playing an air deck with crazy burst potential, and you're getting a whole lot of that card draw ability back that air had previously lost with the rotation of Lend-Lease. That seems like a very potent way, and even if it runs less expansion cards, that might be the sort of the meta way of using Strike Group. No matter what deck ends up shaking out to be the best thing, Strike Group is an incredibly powerful card that is going to have a huge impact on the meta, and if not immediately, it's going to have an impact on the meta at some point down the line, because there's no way this card exists in the game and is not able to be abused by a tier 1 deck. This card's incredible. Then let's get back to Soviets. And Soviets are getting the 676th Regiment, which is a 2-cost 1/5 infantry with Blitz. So, already, as I like to do here, let's talk about that body. So, at 2 credits, 1/5 is rate. You can think of the 5th Brigade, the 2-credit 1/5 Guard. This is a 2-credit 1/5 Blitz. That's rate. You probably wouldn't ever play that in a deck, but it is the rate cost. But, as power creepers want to do, it is going to have an additional effect on top of that, and its additional effect is gains +2 attack and shock every time it takes damage. Which means if your opponent plays say a cavalry regiment, or a Type 94 and they hit you in the face, they get a 2/1 in the front line, then you play down a 676th Regiment and hit into it, you now have a 3/3 shock left over after taking out their guy. That is quite good. Or maybe you play 676th Regiment and then you play Winter Warfare, and it kills the 1 health guys, and then you push this to the front line, and it's now a 3-4 shock in the front line. That's pretty good. And there is a important Soviet card that we will be looking at a little bit later, which is Rush, which says choose a unit to deal 1 damage to, and then it does an additional effect. But basically, this is supporting this self-damaging units counter-offensive archetype for Soviets. Soviets' 2 main things this expansion are convert and counteroffensive. And this is a pretty decent card to be counteroffensive because it is high in health. It grows when it gets damaged, and you want to be playing Winter Warfare effects to damage all of the units, and then you buff them, and it gets attack, and it gets shock. Unfortunately, I don't think this card... Well, sorry. This card is very good. I don't think the deck that this card is played in is going to be very good, so I don't think people are going to play this card particularly, because I feel like it just doesn't do enough in a control deck, unless the meta is very Jaggro forward and there's just a lot of 1 health guys that are coming out. But if we're seeing more like 2 health guys, like 35 Ts, the shock guy, some like Germany, France still around with dragons and whirlwinds and whatnot, if we're seeing higher health guys, I think Soviet control is just going to easily stick with 845th, and if they're Italy ally Fiats. But maybe this guy like sneaks in as the 2-drop of choice for just like dealing with aggro's units if there's a lot of 1 health guys, just because you can slam them down on turn 2. Your opponent doesn't really want to trade into this, because it's also going to be very hard for them to trade into this, but if they don't trade into this, then it lets you hit into something and now it gains shock for the next time it attacks, or maybe you play like a Winter Warfare and it gains shock and then lets you do like a huge temper swing. Anyways, my point is that this guy is a very powerful card. I'm just not quite seeing the world where this immediately fits into any decks post-expansion. Then we have the Tide Turns, which is a 3-credit Japanese order, elite rarity, and how crazy is this going to be? Because if we think back to the 3-credit Japanese elites, there's some big shoes to step into. We had Shinano, which is obviously quite depressing now, but Shinano on release was absolutely meta-warpingly insane and had to be nerfed. We had Audacity, which is still kind of... Audacity might be one of my least favorite cards in the entire game to play against. It's up there with Comet. If you get hit by a turn 3 Audacity to kill like your 3 health unit, you are just depressed and going to lose. There's Raiding Brigade, an oldie but a classic. 3-credit Japanese elites. Very, very high bar. What does the Tide Turns do? Well, it says shuffle your hand into your deck and draw an equal amount. So, alright, it's a shuffle card. And you go down on cards still, though, but it's a mulligan. And it's going to trigger all of your shuffle units. And what does the other effect say? Well, it says deal damage to all units equal to the Navy cards shuffled in. So, this card is absolutely atrocious. This might be... Well, okay, I can't say it's the worst card that we've seen in this expansion, because you could just, like, make a deck and throw in, like, 20 Navy cards into it, and then you use the Tide Turns as just, like, a... You know, sometimes I draw this card, and it's a 3-credit wipe the entire board. That deck is going to suck, but in that deck, this card feels very good in it. And it's going to be, like, the only reason you sometimes win games, but it's not a good way to build a deck. So the issue with this is there's 2 things going on here. One is Shuffle, and one is Navy. From the Shuffle aspect, all of the Shuffle cards we have seen so far are units. This says deal damage to all units. This will wipe your own board, which just has immediate anti-synergy with Shuffle. You can't run this in a Shuffle deck. Okay, well, what's the next thing? It says Navy cards in hand when you shuffle in. We ignore the fact that shuffling doesn't matter for this deck, because, again, all of the Shuffle payoffs are units. So what about Navy cards? Does Japan have a lot of Navy cards? No, not really. Japan got, I think it's literally 1 Navy card from this expansion. It's a standard, but it's a standard that draws itself when you play it, so you actively only want to have 1 of them in your hand at a time. So there are other Japanese Navy cards that exist, like, beyond this expansion. There's Ijan Shinano. There is the Yamamoto, which is coming back, of course. Those are 2 Navy cards. But, like, Shinano's probably not a card you want to play in your deck. And Yamamoto is like the win con of your deck if you are building a deck with Yamamoto in it. But what is that deck going to look like? I don't know. But again, do you want to shuffle away your win con? Probably not. Are you going to want to hold off on playing your win con until you draw the tide turns to maximize value out of it? Probably not. Well, one of the other big Navy allies, there is Germany. Germany has a bunch of Navy cards, but their best Navy cards are all elites, which means you can't run this in Japan main because this is an elite, which means you can't run this with the German Navy cards. Well, what about the Italian Navy cards, which we haven't really looked at yet, but Italy is getting a bunch of Navy cards that we'll look at down the line. Well, the Italian Navy cards are on top of your deck, but they don't gain Navy when they enter your hand, so you can't fill up your hand easily with a bunch of Navy cards. So, like, I don't know what deck you're supposed to play this in. This card is just, like, absolutely abysmally awful. Even if you had a deck that regularly had 3 Navy cards in your hand, this is 3 credits, shuffle your entire deck away, or you shuffle your entire hand away for random other cards of an equal amount. So you're just mulliganing, which, if you're a competitive player, you never want to mulligan just away your entire hand in the middle of a game, typically because you are trying to plan around with the information you have, and if you just play a card that says shuffle all of your cards away and draw back an equal amount, you can't make a plan because you don't have the information of what you're going to be drawing until you play this. And even if you do that, you have 3 Navy cards in your hand that you don't want to play, and you want to play the tide turns, which is already, as we've gone over, an incredibly unlikely situation to be in the first place. You're probably going to have to be actively making bad turns by not playing Navy cards to stack up for the tide turns to work, which then shuffles away your hand and doesn't allow you to plan for what comes next. But you do all of that, and what is the effect? It is 3 damage to all units. So you lose all of your units, well, not all, like, 3 damage, you're not even killing half of the units on your opponent's board, and you're damaging any units on your board. Like, what was the point of this? Like, this card could cost 1, and it still wouldn't be worth building a deck around. This card could be free, and, like, maybe you would play it with no Navy cards in your deck as just a 0 credit mulligan. Maybe. That would, like, be the only way it would see play. This card is, like, I don't get it. I absolutely don't get it. Something got lost with this card, because all of the other stuff with Japan is very interesting and, like, fits together very well into different ways of building different decks. Like, Japan-Poland Legions is very interesting in how it's combining intel with, like, a little bit of shuffle in there as well. The Navy card that we'll look at down the line is very interesting, and it can fit into a few different decks and has some synergies with some of the other Navy support that Japan got. But it just doesn't fit anything. But anyways, rant aside, this card's terrible. If you open it in a pack on expansion day, I'm very sorry for you. If this is like your gold elite at the end of the month, that's a tragedy. You can post that in my Discord. I'll give you a sobbing emote reaction. This is abysmal. Great art, though. Great art. It makes me wish that this card didn't suck. This is a great candidate for a reworked card in, like, 2 years. I just wish that they had done that before it got released, so we would be able to play with a actual functional card. But anyway, sorry, I'm ranting. Let's get on to Buffs, which is just a very fun name, and it has a fun art on it. But Buffs is a 1 credit, 1/3 British infantry with Fury. And it says, gets +1/+1 when it is targeted by an order or deployment effect, and this is friendly or enemy. So you play this, and it's a 1 credit, 1/3 Fury. And then you play Kangaroo Transport on this, which is given infantry blitz and it acts as a tank. And now it becomes a 2/4 Fury that can move and attack. And then you play other cards that, I don't know. Yeah, I don't really see the point of this card. There's some combos you can make with this card. None of them are worth playing in a remotely competitive sense. As a 1 attack, 1/3, like, your opponent's not going to trigger this. If your opponent triggers this, it's because they've never seen this card and didn't read the card text before targeting it with an effect. And if your opponent doesn't trigger it, it's hard to trigger it yourself because it has to be targeted by the effect. So you can't even play this with, like, Cup of Tea or something to make it like a 2/6. very easily, because Cup of Tea is not a targeted effect. So yeah, this guy is a bit of pack filler, but at least it's interesting pack filler. Then we have the 22nd Marines, which is a 3-credit, 3/4 infantry for US, standard rarity, and we are bringing back the veteran effect, which is typically very fun. So it is a 3/4 infantry with blitz, so this is sort of the 1st Marines stat line, so it's also kind of fitting that 22nd Marines, 1st Marines, you got some carry over there. And it says, becomes veteran, and you draw a card when you play a Navy card. Now this is questionably worded. I don't know why it's not when you play a Navy card, draw a card, and this becomes veteran. Just throwing that out there. But anyways, essentially, this is just a 3/4 blitz infantry. And once it is on the board, if you play a Navy card from your hand, you draw a card, and this turns into the veteran version. And the veteran version is a 4/4 blitz infantry that says deals double damage if there is a Navy card on top of your deck. So if there's a Navy card on top of your deck, this guy is a 8/4 infantry, and that is damage counts to hitting the HQ. That counts for you attacking enemy units, and that counts for the enemy units attacking this guy. So that is very, very powerful if you have a Navy card on top of your deck. Now, you might be thinking, well, I can game the system. I'll just simply hover this over a card and see how much damage that it's going to tell me it's going to deal before letting go. It doesn't do that. It will always say it will deal 4 damage until you actually let go and the attack goes through, and then it will say it will deal 4 or 8 damage. So you can use this to see if there is a Navy card on top of your deck. Probably, ideally, you want to put a Navy card on top of your deck, or give the top card of your deck a Navy, so that this has 8 attack. And if it does, this can kill you quite quickly. And, you know, this is just a solid guy for a kind of like mid-rangey or just fight for the board type card in a US Navy deck. And that's pretty good because a lot of the other Navy cards that we have seen for US are just very expensive orders. And if you play a lot of very expensive orders, you kind of die to anything that's remotely aggressive. So 22nd Marines is both a very big finisher if your opponent can't remove them, because they can end the game out very, very quickly, as well as it's just a very good unit to fight for the board, because you can play out a 22nd Marines on turn 3, and then your opponent puts some guys into the front line, and then on turn 4 you hit one of them, and then you play a Navy card, and now it heals back to a 4/4, and you draw a card, and also now it has the crazy veteran effect of sometimes dealing damage. And also an important note is it doesn't say +4 damage, it says double damage. So if you can find a way to buff the veteran version of this, so you like buff its attack with for freedom, or you know, you like for some reason you slam down a blitzkrieg and this becomes a 7/4, and then you attack them in the face, and then you have a Navy card on top of your deck and this becomes a 14/4. Yeah, there's some crazy stuff you could do with that, but you know, this is all around just like a solid card you'd definitely consider playing in a Navy deck, especially because it just replaces itself if you trigger the veteran. Then we have Semper Fi, which is a 1-credit special order for US, and it says convert 4 of the top 8 cards of your deck into 22nd Marines. Give them the Navy type. So normally, only orders can have Navy type. Like, the only orders that are naturally... Sorry, the only cards in the game that are naturally Navy subtype are orders. Semper Fi converts 4 of the top 8 cards of your deck into the 22nd Marine, which is the unit we just looked at, the veteran guy. And it turns them... and it gives them the additional Navy type, which means when you play the first 22nd Marines, nothing happens. It's just the same as. It does not trigger off of itself. You just simply play out the 22nd Marines. And then you play out the second 22nd Marines created by Semper Fi, and that has the Navy type, which means it triggers the first one. It will trigger the veteran on the first 22nd Marines and draw you a card, which might draw you into the third Semper Fi 22nd Marines, which will then trigger the veteran on the second 22nd, and then potentially draw you into the fourth one. You sort of see where this is going. Now, you're not guaranteed to do that because 4 of the top 8 cards of your deck are converted into this. So it could be the top 4. It could be cards 5, 6, 7, 8. So you could play this and then not see a 22nd Marines in 4 draws. Or you could play this and then only see 22nd Marines for your next 4 draws, or anything in between. So this is a very random card. It also converts cards. It does not shuffle them on top of your deck. So this means it is a trigger for convert stuff. You're probably not going to play this in a Convert deck, though, because Convert has no other crossover with Navy, and if you're getting Marines, it's probably because you want to be doing Navy stuff. But the important thing with this converting 4 of the top 8 cards is it means that it is actually just deleting 4 cards out of your deck, effectively, because they are turned into these. Your deck does not grow in size, and potentially you could lose like a really big win con depending on what your deck is looking like. And one thing to do with this is you play Serrify because it puts Navy cards on top of your deck, but you're not guaranteed for a Navy card to be the first card on top of your deck, or it also might be that it converts existing Navy cards in your deck into these Navied Marines. So, all in all, this card could be very effective. I'm not... This card's going to need to see a lot of... Like, we're going to need to test around a lot with this card to see how worth it ends up being, because you can run 22nd Marines on its own in a Navy deck as just a good guy. It draws a card to replace itself, it can trade out on board, and it gets better in the late game. It's just a fine guy. Playing Serrify is saying that these Marines are my win con, and I am perfectly fine losing cards in my deck being converted into these guys. And that is what I'm a lot less sure of. But it's a pretty cool art. It's an interesting card thematically. So hopefully it sees some play, but I'm not entirely convinced. Then we have the IJN Makura. So this is the Japanese Navy card that they're getting in this expansion that I spoke about, and I'm really hoping that they don't also have another Navy card. I'm just trying to think it off the top of my head. I don't think so. But the IJN Makura, it is a standard, so you can have 4 of them. You can get all 4 IJN Makuras in your hand for your Tide Turns play. But it says, for 1 credit, pin target unit. At the end of your turn, draw an IJN Makura from your deck. So it's sort of like a 32nd Infantry, Chocolate Boys, 25th Cavalry type effect where it's a standard that draws itself, as so you run 4 of them and the first 3 draw the one before them, assuming that you don't draw multiple of them at the same time, which would suck. However, unlike the other ones, where one was a deployment effect and the other one is a destruction effect, the IJN Makura is at the end of your turn effect, so it means if you play IJN Makura and then draw a bunch of cards, you might draw into all of your other IJN Makuras, and then you're not going to draw anything at the end of your turn. You can't, like, string them together and pin 4 things in the same turn without just having all 4 in your hand, and then you're down 4 cards. Whereas if you play it once, you draw the other one. But this is a great way to just thin out your deck. It's a great way of just sort of putting in stall tools that don't really cost space in your deck, because at the end you're getting 4 pin, but it's effectively only 1 card, because at least the first 3 draw to replace itself, so you're effectively only losing 1 card, but you're pinning 4 things, which is quite good. It is also a Navy card, so that could work with Navy things. So yeah, this is just all around a pretty good card. The one thing I don't like about this is that it says pin target unit and not pin target enemy unit, and we will see that this could lead to some very silly situations, but just thinking of one off the top of my head where the German 3-6, I forget what the card is, I think it's a Panzer Grenadier, but the German 3-6 that says deal 3 damage to the enemy HQ the first time you play a Navy card each turn. Well, if you play that guy, and then your opponent has no units on the board, you can pin that guy, leave him in the support line, just pin it, and it deals the burn damage straight to the opponent's HQ, because he played a Navy card, and then it replaces itself in your hand. So it removes a potential line of counterplay against a German-Japan Navy burn deck in a very unthematic way. Like, it's kind of dumb that you're pinning your own units to burn out the opponent. Yeah, I kind of wish that this could only target enemy units, but that's a bit of a nitpick. All around, I think this card is pretty cool, and definitely going to see some play. And we have another Navy card here. We have the HMS Formidable, which says, change the attack of a friendly unit to be equal to its defense. It fights all enemy units in a random order. This is very similar to Chain Home, which was a limited order for Britain from this expansion for 3 credits. It's changed the attack of a friendly unit to be equal to its defense, and then it fights 1 random enemy unit. This is the big brother to Chain Home. It fights everything. And the idea is this can be an AoE if you have a high enough health unit, where, like, you know, if you have a 1-8 guard on the board, or say a 0-8 in the case of I'm blanking on its name, but there's a 0-8 guard for Britain from this expansion. So say you have that guy, it's a 0-8, you play HMS Formidable on it, it becomes an 8-8, and then it fights everything, and everything gets chucked into the 8-8, and that's presumably going to kill everything it hits. Unfortunately, that, depending on the attack of your opponent's board, it might just die really fast. So like if your opponent has like a 5 attack thing and a 3 attack thing, and then like a whole bunch of like 2 attack things, you might just hit the 5 attack and then the 3 attack, and then all the 2 attack things survive, and you did 5 credits, trade your guard into 2 units, which is not amazing. There is some very fun things you can do with this, though, which I've seen people theory crafted with, which is play this with the 7th Alpini, which is the 4/7 Italian guard that heals for every time it deals damage. So if you play the 7th Alpini and then you play HMS Formidable on it, it becomes a 7/7, and then it attacks everything. And as it attacks things, you gain health. So, like, if it attacks 4 units, you heal 28. That's pretty good. There's also the Italian Fighter, which says whenever you heal your HQ, heal a random enemy unit. So if you have that on the board, and you play this with the 7th Alpini, it will continue to heal itself, so it will just wipe out the entire board. You heal for a ton, you keep everything, and, you know, stuff goes crazy. I think that card's rotated, I'm like 90% sure, but even if it isn't, that's still a 13 credit combo, or more likely a multi-turn setup that your opponent has a ton of time to play around. All in all, I don't think HMS Formidable is going to see a meaningful amount of play, but it's a very interesting card, and, you know, maybe you're going to pick it off Baker Street regulars from time to time and go crazy. Then we have a Gifu Regiment, which is another reason that I am not a huge fan of the IJN Makura being able to pin your own units, because Gifu Regiment is a 4-credit, 4/5 infantry for Japan, standard rarity, and it says once per turn, gains shock, and you draw a card when you play a navy card. And again, Japan's main navy card for this expansion is the Makura, which, again, could lead to a situation where your opponent isn't playing units on the board, and you just play Gifu and then pin your own Gifu to draw cards and cycle through your deck to presumably reach whatever combo you're looking for. So, in that case, again, IJN Makura, but that aside, this is just really solid. A 4-credit, 4/5 infantry is a solid body, and its effect is once per turn gain shock and you draw a card when you play a navy card. You are presumably playing this alongside a navy card, which works really well with Makura, because Makura is cheap, and you are likely to always have a Makura in your hand, since there are 4 of them in your deck, and they draw each other. So on turn 5, you can play Gifu, and then you play Makura, and then you draw a card, and this gains shock, so it can't attack immediately, but you now have a 4/5 shock infantry your opponent has to be worried about. If they ever want to take the front line on the following turn, you can pin something in the front line to prevent them from getting the value trade, and then also the Makura will draw you another Makura at the end of your turn to enable you to attack, and then play a second Makura, and then draw again, and then regain shock for the following turn after that. You see, there's a lot of cool synergy here, none of which has any combo with the tide turns, because once again, if you play Gifu Regiment, it's a unit that you don't want to take out with your own tide turns. Yeah, so this is a really cool card. Japan is positioning itself quite well to be the go-to ally for the German main Navy burn deck, I'm thinking, just because of Gifu, but Gifu and the 4-credit, 3/6 burn guy for Germany, they're both standards, they're both 4 credits, you really want to run 8 of them, but even if you don't run like a full stack of Gifu, which I don't think is necessary, like 2 Gifu, 4 Makura, and then maybe a couple other cards in there, like the 77th is still insane. Make an all-around very, very good German-Japan Navy deck, and that's definitely something I'm going to be trying out. Then we get to some finish cards, so we have the Light Detachment 15, which is a 1-credit 0/4 guard for Finland, that says, gets +1 attack when a unit with higher attack is deployed. And that is from either player. So this is a very interesting card. You play this down on turn 1, and you played a 0/4 guard. And then your opponent says, oh, you played a 0/4 guard, I'm going to play down a Type 94, and hit your 0/4 guard. But they play down the Type 94, which has 1 attack. And then Light Detachment gains 1 attack, because a unit with higher attack was played. So now you have a 1/4 guard, and they have a 1/1, and they're feeling like a bit of an idiot. And then you go and play a 35T, which has 2 attack, which means Light Detachment goes up to 2 attack, and then you hit their 1/1 guy, tank. And yeah, that's how crazy Light Detachment is. In reality, it's very easy for your opponent to play around this card once they have read what its text does. And what type of deck that you are looking to play this in, I'm a little unsure of, because like you could play this in a very aggressive deck where you're just using this as a very high health, low cost unit that its attack will go up, and then you get it to the front line, and it's like guiding your other tanks, or it's guiding your tanks, and you push it to the front line in like a German Finland Heinz type deck. You could also run this as just a very anti-aggro card in like a Finnish control deck. Neither of those two things feel particularly strong with this card in them compared to other Finnish cards you could run. So I'm feeling like this is kind of just like a good card, but it needs to be a great card because it's a Finnish card. So yeah, I'm not expecting to see a whole lot of light detachment, but it's a very interesting card, and it's certainly not bad. Then we have the KM Prince Yugan, or Eugen, one of those probably. It's a 4-credit countermeasure for Germany, and it is a Navy card. And it says, when the enemy deploys a unit, put it on top of their deck and convert it into a production. So you have a little bit of convert synergy here. But also, you have a absolutely nasty draw denial card. So, essentially, if your opponent is top decking, and you hold up Prince Yugan, and your opponent top decks a unit, and they play the unit, not only do you destroy the unit effectively, you actually put it on top of their deck and then turn it into a completely useless card. So you're saying, for 4 credits, I stop you from being able to do anything effective with the unit that you drew. And also, you're not drawing a card next turn. That's insane, if you play it in that situation. Now, it gets a whole lot worse if you're, like, try to hold this up on turn 4, and your opponent has like 7 cards in hand, they throw out a 1-drop, and now you've just given them a production to play on next turn to like continue to accelerate onto the board while they kill you on turn 6. That's a whole lot worse. So it's a very greedy card, but just how powerful it is, this feels like a staple in a draw denial deck, just because of how completely and utterly powerful it is at denying a unit and also denying a draw in the following turn. It's 2 for 1 in the card draw advantage sense, and that is very powerful. That's something that is hard to do anymore since the Wolfpack nerf. Obviously, Annihilation technically can 2 for 1 if they still have cards in their hand by 7 credits. Prince Yugan, very, very powerful card. Very, very disgusting in a handlock deck. Then we have the 3rd Mixed Regiment, which is a 3-credit, 3/4 infantry for Japan, standard rarity, that says, once per turn, deal 2 damage to the enemy HQ when you shuffle your deck. And this is just going to be another card straight into the shuffle deck, which is going to give you a bit of burn, so now you can have your French guy that buffs, AoE buffs the entire board. You have the big guard that can just be a huge like massive guy that beats down your opponent really quickly, or a very good defensive tool to stop you from dying to aggro decks. And now you have the 3rd Mixed Regiment, which can help you just burn out your opponent or get chip damage in earlier on into the game. And then you throw this in with just like the standard Japan package of like 77th and the 1k shock guy and like Type 94, and you're probably cooking with a very effective Jaggro deck with a bunch of the shuffle stuff. This guy, I don't know if you run 4 of, because a 3-credit 3/4 that doesn't affect the board state is not amazing if there are other aggro decks going around. However, this is definitely, it can be a very effective tool. And what I'm foreseeing here is that support line targeting is going to be incredibly important in this metagame. Because there's like this guy that you're just going to keep in the support line forever and burn your opponent down. There's the German guy who's like the big brother to this dude who's going to sit in the support line and burn you down. And if you're playing like a control deck that relies on like infantry unit trading, like the Winter Regiment, Schützen Regiment, or Schützen 77th style of control deck where you're just like, come to me and I'll beat like down your guys in the front line with my superior blitz infantry, you're going to get absolutely farmed by all of these infantry sitting in the support line and burning you out. So we're going to have to shift what types of cards that we're using in our control decks around what is likely going to be a very burn-centric metagame. Then we have the Kyoto Regiment, which is a 3-credit 2/4 infantry, limited rarity for Japan, that says Guard and Intel 1. And anytime you see a unit with intel on it, or a card that summons units with intel on it, think Thunder Division. If you play this with Thunder Division on the board, which is, Thunder Division is the Japanese elite that gives all units +2/+2 when you play an intel card. This comes down as a 4/6 in that case. And its deployment is remove an enemy unit until this unit leaves the battlefield. It is the Sendai Regiment effect. So you play Kyoto Regiment, you pick a unit on the enemy side of the board, and that unit goes away until they kill Kyoto Regiment. So this could obviously be used as a cheaper Sendai Regiment in an aggro deck, with the big downside of having guard instead of smokescreen. Or you could play this as an intel card, as just like a tempo intel card in an intel deck. Or you could just play this as like a solid 3k guard that buys you time, because if you play this down on turn 3 and you use it to remove like their buffed up 35T or Type 94 or whatever, they might still be able to remove this, but it still might have bought you time because they have to trade units into it or spend their turn playing a removal order to get rid of this, and then the unit that comes back has lost its buff. This is just a really solid card. We're going to see this in a number of decks. Absolutely no complaints. Very interesting. And last but not least, for Japan, we have the last Japanese elite here, the 10th Recon. We have some beautiful art on the card. It is a 2-cost, 2-1 infantry with 0 operation cost for Japan. And it says Blitz, Shock, Intel 1. So again, more Thunder Division triggers. And it says deployment, choose a card in hand, shuffle it into your deck, then draw a card. So this is just like an all-around card that sort of ties things together here. So it shuffles, which is already good. It has Blitz and Shock with 0 op cost, which is just insane for any card, period. It has Intel for the Intel decks, and it also kind of has synergy with the Makura if you're playing in a Navy deck, because you don't want to draw 2 Makuras, and this, if you're perfectly happy with your hand, you just simply pick the card you least likely to play, you shuffle it into your deck, and then you draw a card, and you're happy with it. But if you have 2 Makuras in your hand, and you don't want 2 Makuras in your hand because they draw each other, you pick one of the 2 Makuras in your hand, you shuffle it back into your deck and draw a card, so you stay even on hand size. However, you now, likely get your maximum value out of the Makura regiments, or the IJN Makura, not regiments. So all around, this guy is just like a really good card. You're going to play him in Legions decks. You're going to play him in Shuffle decks. You're probably going to play him in Jaggro. This is just a very, very good card. And, it's also not broken because it doesn't snowball in any capacity. It can only draw... it doesn't even draw a card. Your card advantage stays the same. It has 1 health. It's an infantry, so it can't hit the support line immediately. And, yeah, this is just a really, really good card. This is just probably a staple card for Japan, but in a way that is not domineering over the rest of the cards and the rest of the meta. And that brings us to the end of part 4, and that is, so we've seen some very, very interesting cards. Some very exciting stuff. We've seen sort of all the archetypes get rounded out. There is another 20 cards that I have left to cover from the expansion. Primarily Britain is the main nation that we've been missing a lot of stuff from. So subscribe if you want to see part 5, which again should be coming out within 12 to 24 hours of you seeing part 4 release. But there's also technically a part 6 where I had the opportunity to reveal my own cards. That video is already up on my channel, and those cards will also be covered again in part 5 tomorrow. But before we close out the video, 1939 released an article explaining what is a Navy card, and I realized that I probably should have put that at the start of this video, but whatever, we're putting it here at the end. So let's quickly go through that, and just to get very clear what are Navy cards and what is a Navy card, because that's going to make this entire expansion revolving around Navy cards make a whole lot more sense. So let's get into that article. So, Kards, Naval Warfare, Navy subtypes is in a video where they break this down, which you are welcome to watch yourself. But essentially, what the effect is that all of the Navy cards are orders in the game that will have a prefix to show that they are a Navy card. If you hover over the card, it will also say Navy in the card subtype, in the same way that you can see Shermans or T-34s or Commandos. With the little subtype, you'll be able to see Navy, but the orders will all have HMS for British ones, USSS for American ones, KM for German ones, IJN for Japanese ones, RM for Italian ones, and ORP for Polish ones. And these are the nations that are getting Navy cards, so you can see that is 4 out of 5 of the main nations and 2 out of 4 of the minor nations, at least for now. And then there are a few units that are able to gain the Navy subtype which are the 22nd Marines if spawned by Semper Fi, or the 40 Royal Marines, which its destruction effect will put a Royal Marine with Navy on top of your deck. So there's a few specific units that can gain the Navy subtype. And this just basically goes through the Navy cards for their themes. And then here we go, which is all of the Navy cards that are already in the game that are going to be Navy. So if you sort of look through this list, it is what is mentioned, that it's the things with the prefixes, and you can see a lot of the old cards that did not previously have the prefixes now have the prefixes. So it's now IJ Ed Yamada, which is now KM Bismarck, KM Admiral Hipper, just to very show that they are Navy cards. The one exception are the U-boats, U-375, U-48, and U-16 are all Navy cards, but they do not have the prefix. Well, they have the U for the U-boat prefix. But these are the Navy cards that currently exist in the game. Not all of these are standard. This is just all of the non-Naval Warfare Navy cards. So, like, U-48 is not in standard right now. I think pretty much everything else is in standard if my memory serves. But yeah, these are the Navy cards that you'll be having to play around with. I think the thing that really stands out to me here is, one, how little Japan has. It's Shinano, Yamamoto, and Makura. And two, how good the German ones are. They have Hipper, they have a buffed up Bismarck, which is still like, middle ground. They have U-375, which is not great, but it is cheap, and they want cheap Navy cards based on all of the Navy units for Navy triggers. They have the buffed up U-16, or the reworked U-16, which is quite powerful. Germany, and then they have Tirpitz, which is like the new elite one, which is like absolutely insane. German Navy cards are just blowing everybody else out of the water. Britain has a lot of Navy cards, but none of them are particularly good. Same with Poland. They have some decent Navy cards, but they don't really have any Navy synergy. But the important thing here to note is what are not Navy cards. If it is not on this list, or it's coming out from Naval Warfare and follows the, has the prefix, or it's the units that can gain Navy, it does not have Navy. And this is going to confuse a lot of people. So to be very clear, if it's not on this list, it does not have Navy. You don't have to ask any other questions. You can complain that things aren't Navy, but if it's not on this list, they are not Navy cards. And that's going to confuse a lot of people because there are cards that have Navy in the name, or naval in the name. So for example, Naval Operation, or Seaborne Invasion, for example, where, you know, they are referencing the Navy. The art will have boats in them, perhaps. These are not naval cards. And the silliest exceptions to this, I think, are the Kriegsmarine. Literally Kriegsmarine. It's what the KM stands for in the KM Bismarck. The Kriegsmarine, the German Navy, is not a Navy card because it is not a specific boat or vessel. That is the requirements for a Navy card, is to be a specific boat or vessel, or in the case of the infantry, the marine units that are being transported, I suppose, by non-specific boats or vessels. And then the other one that I've seen people bring up is the third tier of German research, which is the Type 21 U-boat. That is a model of U-boat. It is not a specific U-boat, which is why it is not a Navy card. So yeah, you can, you know, complain all you want about this decision to decide what is or is not a Navy card. But at the very least, I think that they have done a very good job of making it clear in-game with adding all of these prefixes. And that is, that's really where I'm going to leave it at that. I don't think it's really worth complaining about the decisions on what is or isn't a Navy card. It was always going to be tough. They were always going to upset some people. There was no ability to please the 100% of the community with this. But that is going to be it from me for this one. The article that, this entire article will be in the link in the description if you want to read through it, watch the video, all of that. Subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss part 5, as well as videos that are going to be coming out this week related to the expansion, showing off new decks, showing off stream highlights perhaps, as well as other projects that I have been working on. And I mentioned stream highlights. You can go to my Twitch, link in the description. I will be live streaming over there, most likely on Wednesday, and perhaps maybe on Thursday as well, showing off new decks once the expansion drops. And you can join my Discord to get the exact time there, or just simply follow me on Twitch. But with all of that being said, let me know your thoughts about all of this, all the cards discussed, the entire expansion as a whole, and I will catch all of y'all in the next one. Thanks for watching.